for you. So, how are you?
I'm good, you? I haven't seen you for, what, a year? In Prague last time, wasn't it?
It was perfect. Your visit in Prague was very successful for you, for us. It was a very nice time for us.
Well,
We hope you will come again.
oh, well, I hope so. I'm doing 2 more all-day events in Bratislava this weekend and then in Maastricht in the Netherlands at the end of November. And then I'm putting the all-day events to one side and I'm going to start doing evening events around Britain and Europe. And come at the information from another angle because I've got a book coming out in November called Everything You Need to Know But Have Never Been Told, which is explosive and also covers the subjects in detail. So I'm going to use the talks to come from another angle, so I'm looking forward to that.
Mm-hmm. So, first question, have you heard about the political situation in Czech Republic?
Well, yes, this is the election.
Yeah.
And it's interesting for me because I've been talking and writing for a long time about the way that people have been left voiceless by the political class, whether it's the left or the right or the centre. It's what I call the postage stamp. They call themselves different names, they put themselves at different points on the political spectrum, but they're actually standing on the same postage stamp. You know, the left is standing on the left of the postage stamp, the right on the right of the postage stamp, and the centre at the centre of the postage stamp. And what this has done, because there's this kind of agreement among them that you don't mention this and you don't say that, you don't highlight that, that great chunks of the population in every country have been voiceless. They've had no ability to make themselves heard at the ballot box, because whichever party you vote for, it doesn't represent your view. And this is why we had Brexit in Britain. Mm-hmm. It's because a great chunk of it turns out to be a majority in the referendum of the population of Britain had been voiceless for so long that there was no party that represented them. So it didn't matter who you voted for, the same basic policy went into government. What Brexit did, because it was do you want to stay in the EU or do you want to come out? Mm-hmm. That, no parties involved, that gave people the ability to have a voice. Mm-hmm. Yes, and because this group of people had been basically silenced for so long, it was a shock to the political establishment, not just of Britain, but of Europe and the EU, because this voice they thought they'd suppressed had spoken. And if you notice now, it's more obvious in Britain, of course, the political class in Britain and the political bureaucratic class that runs the EU are now running around trying everything they can to stop Brexit happening. But around Europe, in the different countries of Europe, there has been an expression of the same theme that we saw in Britain. It's simple. If you leave people voiceless for long enough with the political class establishment, then eventually parties and people are going to emerge that are going to articulate that voiceless majority. And the voiceless majority, or great numbers anyway, of the population are going to gravitate towards that. So it's interesting that what you have is the political class around Europe, which has ignored these voiceless people for so long, are now saying, look, the rise of the far right, oh, nationalism, populism, it's terrible. Well, excuse me, you ignoring this great number of the population, decade after decade, has caused it. That's why it's happening. And I am very questioning always of everything. And I'm not someone who is saying, oh yeah, populism, fantastic, yeah, isn't it great? I'm saying, well, hold on a minute, this is the dynamic that's led to it. But what do these people really represent? And, you know, the greatest form of human control, or one of them, a foundation to human control, is divide and rule. It's playing different groups off against each other. So the population is fighting each other while the string pullers are working through both sides. And I say that the migrant crisis in Europe and what has happened, and where Chancellor Merkel just opened the door, not just to refugees of war who deserve help, but anybody basically in that period where Germans were going, what's going on? This has created a situation in Europe of very potential, not just potential, but actual divide and rule. And I'm seeing this, the rise of these populist parties and played off against the political class of before. And I see another vehicle for divide and rule. What we surely need to do is, and the only way we're going to sort these things out, is to stop looking at each other and judging each other by our colour, by our race, our religion, our politics, and start to realise that we all need to work and live together, and two, not every group is one blob of perception and behaviour. This is something that I see very clearly emerging. Been emerging over a long period of time. It's becoming more and more obvious. What I mean by that is we have this concept of groupthink, where everyone thinks the same. But there's another expression of groupthink that I would suggest is very dangerous, and that is to see groups, whatever they are, as one entity. So you hear people say, it's the Muslims, it's the Jews, it's the white supremacists, it's the this, it's the that. And yet, when you use words like Jewish, Islamic, black, white, are we really saying that every single person in that group has the same perceptions, has the same behavior? It's a nonsense. But if we can just say, I don't care what your colour is, I don't care what your religion is, I don't care what your background is, I care what you do and what you say, especially what you do. And I'm going to look at you as an individual, and what you do and what you say is how I'm going to perceive you. Not the colour of your skin, not your background, not how much money you've got, just who you are as an individual. And if we did this whole racism divide, this whole income bracket divide, religious divide would fall apart. So what we're looking at, I would suggest, is the systematic manipulation of this version of groupthink, as I call it, where people, say a white supremacist will judge black people and Muslim people as a blob, an entity. Everyone's the same, it's the Muslims. And people, the black people in America, and the so-called progressive movement in America will say, it's the white supremacy, it's the whites and all this stuff. It's childlike, it's ridiculous. And if we're going to have a society that's going to find harmony then we have to stop judging people in groups and through labels and start looking at them as individuals. Because you take any group, any colour, any race, any religion, I'll show you nice people, I'll show you okay people, and I'll show you seriously unpleasant people. But if we judge everyone in a group, they're all bad, they're all good, which is what political correctness does, frankly, then the world becomes just a teeming mass of conflict through group perception and judgment. And it's got to stop, otherwise it's going to go on, pushing the world along this road it's going now.
You know, the spiritual people of Europe, they say now this is the reaction, or the reaction of the colonization. So the Europe was colonized many years, 100 years.
Yeah.
And this is the reaction of that.
Well, I would say this.
Because everybody try to find how to understand the situation.
Yeah, well, if you want to understand the situation, you've got to go in the shadows. If you want to understand what's going on, you've got to go in the shadows. Don't try to work it out from the world that you see, from information from the television news and the newspapers. You're never going to work it out. Because what the newspapers and the television news are doing, they are constantly holding the dots apart from the other dots. So look at this as an individual thing, look at that as an individual thing, and that. And when you go into the shadows, you start to connect the dots, and now you see the picture. So you have to go into the shadows, and the mainstream media will not go into the shadows. It's just a 5 sense entity that deals only in the 5 sense world alone, and doesn't go into the shadows, literal and metaphorical, that where all this stuff is being orchestrated from. But I would say this because you're absolutely right. I've heard this, and I've got in this new book I do address this area, of many other areas, but this as well. No one has been more appalled than me from a Western point of view than when I was a kid growing up learning about the British Empire. What the British Empire did was, for me, a disgrace. And what all these other empires did was a disgrace. It was to go into other people's countries in Africa and Asia or wherever, South America.
Australia.
Yeah, Australia. And impose their will upon them, take their land, take their culture, and destroy the lives that they had before. Treat them as second-class life, and impose the will of the West upon those countries. That was appalling, disgraceful. I remember learning about it at school when I was a kid, thinking, this happened?
Yeah.
Yes. So how do you respond to that? By doing the opposite? By doing it in reverse? No. What you respond to that by everyone respecting everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, when you go into a country, whether you're white, black, or sky blue, bloody pink, you don't go in there and say, this country is now going to be what I want it to be. You go in there and you respect the indigenous culture. And if you don't like it, we'll go somewhere else. And if you want to, argue that maybe it could be done differently, we'll argue it. But you don't impose your culture on other people. And doing it in reverse what is that? Why is that any different to doing it in the first place? And another thing that I see with so-called progressives, and when I talk about progressives, I'm not talking about liberals. I'm a liberal, if not a political liberal, I'm not political anything. But if you look at the definition of the word liberal, which is supporting freedom of speech, freedom of lifestyle, freedom of expression, I'm a liberal to my DNA. progressives who are, there's a word came out of America, that's kind of left, progressive left, they are anything but liberal. Through political correctness and the imposition of censorship on what people not only increasingly can say, but what they can think, that is the opposite of liberal. So let's just disconnect the word liberal from progressive, because it's not the same thing. So these progressives, and a lot of them are white people with a guilt trip, right? I say to them, I do not feel responsible for white colonialism. You know why? I wasn't there. I didn't do it. I do not have the same mentality, in fact quite the opposite, of those who did do it. And if you go on treating what happened in what we call the past and relate it constantly to the present, then the past just goes on repeating itself. It might repeat itself in reverse, but it goes on repeating itself. Mm-hmm. You know, if there are white people, and there will be, that want to impose a white supremacist state, then challenge them, argue with them, debate them, expose from your point of view the fallacy of that attitude. Yes, but don't treat every white person as having the same mentality as the tiny few. Does every Muslim have the same mentality of someone chopping someone's head off in Syria or Libya or Iraq through ISIS? No, they don't. So this is what I say in terms of groupthink and group perception. The difference between Muslims I've met in the Middle East, some of the nicest people you'd ever come across, they'd give you anything even though they have nothing. Mm-hmm. And someone chopping someone's head off in some religious tyranny, they're not the same thing. They're not the same people. We must not treat them the same. It's the Muslims, but in the same way. Everyone that thinks Adolf Hitler was a nice bloke and wants to impose a racial superior hierarchy, who happens to be white, is not the same person as every white person that exists. And it's this childlike immaturity, the inability to see the individual instead of the group, that allows this divide and rule to be done so easily and played off against everyone else. And you see it in politics, where you'll see a political party and you'll see another political party. How often in politics, same mentality, how often in politics does a member of a political party say of another political party, do you know, I disagree with most of what you said, but that policy, I absolutely agree with that. That's right. No, you don't see that. You see opposition for opposition's sake, because that's what you do. You're a group, they're a group. Whatever that group does, you must oppose. Childlike immaturity. And that is the human disease, childlike immaturity. And until enough people move out of that childlike immaturity into some form of adulthood, where they can see individual behavior instead of group behavior, then this world will go on fighting itself and going along this road we've been going along for so long.
To the politics, in our country is now a party that how to say, I'm sorry, about the politics. Our country, they compare with America. Donald Trump is also an oligarch, like our Andrej Babiš, and the other politics, the opposition, says it's not a normal, it's not a usual political system, because this oligarch, this Andrej Babiš, he tries to transform the old political system. He tries to find a new system. That means to work to see the people, the nationality, our republic like a firma, like a organ or like a family, and it's good to work with the family, to talk with the family. That means our new political system, or new beginning of this political system is relatively similar to Donald Trump system. It's your meaning? What do you think about it?
Well, I always go, ugh, when I hear the word system. A system is something, if you look at systems, they tend to then force, literally or metaphorically, people into adhering to the system. So the system's first, that's the system, and then everyone conforms to the system, whatever that system is. But there's another way, and that's that whatever the system, or what we call the system is, conforms to the people. And I'm a great believer in the devolution of power from the center. Once you have centralization of power, you are giving power over more and more people to fewer and fewer people. This is what globalization is about, it's what the European Union is about, it's all these centralized bodies are about. They're about moving power to the center, and when you do that, very, very few people dictate to everyone else. So I'm a great believer in devolving power to people. But in the end, people try to change things through politics. Well, after 30 years nearly of researching this all over the world, politics is not there to change anything. It's there to stop change that is truly beneficial to people and fairness and justice. And it's there to drive this global agenda on to more and more centralization of power, thus more and more people having their lives controlled by fewer and fewer people. And I think that if we go on thinking that the only way to change the world or change the country is to do it through politics and do it at the ballot box, I think that's a gigantic, gigantic con trick. It's an illusion. They want you to think that the way to change anything is to cast a vote every 4 or 5 years. And then you live in a democracy. You live in a free country. Democracy and freedom, we're told, are interchangeable words. They are not. What is democracy? What is this ballot? First of all, most people, when they are voting for governments, they vote for a party. They don't bother to go and find out much about the person who's standing in their area for that party. They vote for the party. The person themselves representing the party may be a deeply unpleasant, corrupt person. But don't look there, we're voting for the party. So the great amount of the country in the political constituencies and regions where people stand, all you need to get in this constituency and in that constituency is a rosette on with the right colour. And you're in. And there's just a few, relatively few areas of the country which basically decide the government. I mean, look at America, it's classic. Most of America, parts of America are blue, and most of the other parts of America are red. And then there's a few in the middle that switch between the two, and they decide what the government is. So if you've got a political system, A, where people are voting for the party, i.e. the rosette colour, then already the whole thing's falling apart. Because you don't know who you're voting for. You're just voting for a concept, a party. And then let's look at elections. What are political parties doing in elections? Same as Trump's a wonderful example in America this time. They're telling you, or what they do is they sit around a table and they work out what is their natural constituency, what is their natural area of that nation that is likely to vote for them, and what is the area that's almost never going to vote for them. Okay, so we don't have to worry about them because they're not going to vote for us anyway. We just have to get these people. Now, what do these people want to hear from me so they will vote for me? Okay? Right. That's what I'm going to tell them I'm going to do. Oh, yeah. Oh, he's going to make America great again. He is. Yeah, I'll vote for him. He's against Goldman Sachs. He is. He's criticising Goldman Sachs. He's just what we want. And then he gets in. Trump. And this is the same in every country. And he hands the Treasury and the whole American economy to Goldman Sachs in the form of his Treasury Secretary, his Director of National Economic Council, and so on and so forth. Now, there is no contract between the president, would-be president, and the political party and the people. So, although someone said, vote for me and I'll do this, or vote for me just the same and I won't do that, when they do what they said they wouldn't do and don't do what they said they would, there's no comeback. There's no contract, which makes political campaigns and political elections an absolute farce and an irrelevance. And this is how it works. Party A gets voted into power by telling its natural constituency what they want to hear. They do what they were always going to do, which is not what they said they would do. Okay? Now the public say, well, we're going to vote for someone else next time. Okay. And what's going to happen? That other party's going to tell you what you want to hear, going to get you vote, it's going to get into power, and then what happens? It does the same as the other one did. Now, that's Party A in power, replaced by Party B. You don't like Party A, you don't like Party B, because they're both done the same. So how do we get Party B out? We have to vote for Party A again. It's a complete con trick. The whole political system is a con trick. And therefore, put that aside, and we the people have to change it. And how do we change a country? We change a country by the way we interact with each other. When we interact between each other with kindness rather than conflict. When the government says, we've decided to do this, and people say, we're not doing it. We're not doing that. And what they do is they divide and rule people to stop that unity of saying, we're not doing that. If someone comes out of the Prague Parliament or anywhere, Downing Street, the White House, and said, we've had a meeting, we're going to do this. And the people say, we're not doing it. Where's the power of the politician? Gone. So what they want is the target population divided and ruled and manipulated into fighting each other, so that unity is not there to say, we're not doing it. What is society? It's the interaction of people. It's the attitudes of people. It's the way people behave, what people do. That's society. And if we change those things, we change society without a politician necessary. And if the people take their power back and realise there are Millions and millions and millions. I mean, look at America. 320 million people and one president who has ridiculous amounts of power for one man in a so-called free country. Like I've said before, that's not the tail wagging the dog, that's the tail wagging the elephant. And we allow it to happen. We don't have to. What government should be doing is reacting to the will of the people, not dictating what the people will accept and what the people will do. But reverse the whole thing. If we do that, then governments will have to serve the interests of the people and the desires of the people and the demands of the people, and not have those things dictated upon us as they are now. And I don't care what people call themselves. I don't care what colour their rosette is. I don't care if they call themselves populist or they call themselves progressive. No tiny few, down as little as one person, should be dictating to nations of people. It shouldn't happen, but we've allowed it to, and therefore we shouldn't complain about it, because we have the power to change it, if only we would grasp it.
So only one possibility to change the system means to change it from the population, from people, through the people.
Yeah, people.
They wake up and they understand how to change their life.
Yeah, but there's another word here, key word.
Not from above, but from below.
Yeah, it's a key word. It's a key word here, and it's like, to most people, it's garlic to a vampire. It's called responsibility. Responsibility. Don't let anyone look at a country and say, this is happening, this is terrible, without handing them a mirror. Yeah, that's who's responsible. And to everybody collectively. Because, politics is corrupt and politics is self-serving, but it's also a very convenient villain to blame to stop people taking responsibility for what they don't like. Oh, look at that party, oh, that prime minister, oh, that president, oh, look at him. And what are you doing to change what you don't like? Well, I'm going to watch the game, going down the bar. Right, okay, so don't complain about the world that you don't like if you're not prepared to get off your backside and start working towards changing it. Because, people are like, politicians, you can't trust the politics. Well, can you trust yourself to take action that's going to change anything instead of saying it's their fault? It's a very convenient trash can, politics, for all its many and various fundamental faults, for people to hand their responsibility there instead of taking it back. I'll tell you a quick story, just a simple story. There is a town in Britain, a lovely part of the world, and the local major business and employer was closing down. So what would normally happen is, say it's the government, look at the economy, look, we got no jobs, and what that community did would say, okay, we're taking it over. And they took it over and they run it themselves. They employ a lot of people, and they have volunteers as well from the community to help that. The local post office, one of the centres of the community, was closing down because the private corporation that owns it now just wants to cut costs and all the rest of it. So they took it over. The police were cutting costs back, so they closed the local police station. So the community gave the police a place where a policeman could operate from. The petrol station, the gas station, was closing down because the corporation was pulling out. They took over the gas station. So You go to another town that didn't have that attitude of taking responsibility, and you'd have no gas station, no employment, a local bus as well. They shut the bus service down in this town, little town, and so they created a bus service themselves. Another town would have no bus service, that had no none of the things that this other town has. So, and that other town will be saying, basically, this is the point, I'm a victim of circumstance. I'm a victim of the government. I'm a victim of the economy. And the other town says, no, we're not. We're doing it. We're not having it. We're not having what's happening, and we're going to do something about it. Now imagine if we had a society where we had that attitude. That town now, which runs its own bus service, its own petrol station, its own post office, and its own pub and its own major employer, has disconnected so much power over its daily life from the government. It's taken power back from the politicians instead of giving it away. And if that town can do it, why can't everybody else do it? Lack of will, a sense of victimhood. It's not my fault, it's the politicians. Well, it might be, but are you going to just sit there and say for the rest of your life, it's the politicians why I'm in this state? Or are you going to say, I have the power, we collectively have the power, to sort this situation out without them? And it's this, all politics is the only way to change anything, that has disconnected vast chunks of the population from their own power by persuading people that going through politics and political parties is the only way to do anything. It's not. We've just been kidded it is. Why? Because then we'll give our power to politicians, which is what they want.
So the only one medicine for our population is responsibility, consciousness, informations.
Well,
Because
I
if
think
you don't have informations, you cannot be responsible.
I think all those things are connected. I think they're all expressions of each other.
Yeah.
From becoming conscious beyond what I call the program,
Yeah.
you seek out other information. You're not just downloading information and perceptions from the program anymore, from the education system, the mainstream media, and so on. You're expanding your awareness, you're expanding your consciousness, you're expanding your perception of self and reality, and that is expanding you into areas of information that you wouldn't otherwise get. So consciousness takes you to the information, and consciousness also takes you into a sense of responsibility. Mm-hmm. It takes you into an understanding of your own power. The more you expand consciousness out of the program, the more you understand the power you have to impose your desires on your own life, and stop being a victim of life. Start living life instead of life living you. So when you're in the program, what's the program telling you all the time? You know, the state knows best, authority knows best, politics is the only way to change anything. If someone's an academic with letters after their name, they must be all-knowing. I've got news for you, they ain't. They're not anything but. Always a scientist. He must know. No, he mustn't. You look at generation after generation going way back, and you look at what scientists have said about reality and life and possibility. We look back now and we go, how could they be so stupid? But now, always a scientist. No, he can still be so stupid. All the things that are possible now, that scientists said in their time, will never be possible. And so the program wants you to give your power away to all these people who are assets of the program, whether they're anything from academics to scientists to journalists to politicians. And once you expand your awareness, expand your consciousness beyond the program, then you look at the program in a completely different light, and you see, A, how stupid it is, how uninformed it is, how narrow-minded it is, how limited it is, and and what a prison it is, what a prison for the mind it is that most people live in. Not because they have to, because they've let the program dictate their perceptions into a tiny myopia of possibility and limitation.
Maybe we forgot one thing more, the heart, our feeling, our intuition.
Yeah.
Maybe it's the second, so open consciousness and intuition. They are two instruments, two things we need to
different ways of experiencing the world. They're two, experiencing the world.
yeah.
What I call the program, the perception program, which is incessant from cradle to grave, if we allow it to be. What it does, it puts people in their head, not even in their head, in the left side of the brain, which sees everything as apart from everything else. So everything's in the brain. Show me an academic, I'll show you a left brain thinker.
Of course.
Not even a right brain thinker, not a whole brain thinker. There are exceptions, there will be, but overwhelmingly they're imprisoned by the left side of the brain.
Yeah.
And so they are looking at the world through the wrong end of a telescope, basically.
Yeah.
And thinking they're seeing everything. And it's all based on thought. Thought compared with expanded awareness is a village idiot. And yet we worship thought through worshipping the intellect. Oh, he's got a great intellect. Oh yeah, he's got a nice telescope. He's just looking down it from the wrong way, but he's got a good intellect. When you open your heart, it's another way of interacting with the world. And this comes from feeling. This comes from knowing. This thinks. Why does it think? It's trying to work everything out because it doesn't know. Why does this know? Why do we go, I'm thinking, and then we go, I just know. Look at the body language. This knows because it connects us into an expanded range of consciousness with which we can interact. This so focuses our attention on a tiny, tiny smear of potential consciousness, potential awareness, that it's basically living in a prison thinking it's free. And so when you look at this smear of awareness, what I call the postage stamp consensus, that the left brain works on, that's where you find academia, that's where you find science, that's where you find journalism, that's where you find politics, that's where you find the whole shebang. And when people go, I'm going to take another route, I'm going to go into the realms of feeling and knowing rather than just thinking. And the two can work together, but when this is the only point of perception, then you are in real trouble. But when you come from this point of view, suddenly you start to know things. You start to understand things. You don't have to, go through some academic process. You just know it, because you are accessing those levels of awareness that do know. We live in an infinite field of possibility and probability, an infinite field of knowledge and awareness. And when you are focusing your attention only through the five senses and basically the left side of the brain, the amount of that infinite awareness, that sea of knowledge, understanding, intuition, inspiration, you are interacting with a tiny little part of it, which you think is everything. And as you interact with a small part of it, what's the perception of yourself and the world that's going to give you? It's going to give you a sense of what you're interacting with. In other words, limitation. Everything there seems impossible. There are walls everywhere. I can't. This is not possible. That can't be done. When you start to open your energetic field, we talk about the heart. It's opening your energetic field to interact with greater swathes of this infinite possibility, probability, inspiration, knowledge, understanding. Suddenly, your perception of the possible absolutely expands with it. It has to, because now you're interacting with a vast amount of this awareness instead of just a little smear of it. And you know what happens, ironically, because this world is a complete inversion. Everything's inverted, everything's upside down. When someone in that mode hears someone in that mode say, this is what I think, this is what I feel, this is what I'm saying is going on, that says, you're mad, you're crazy, you're a lunatic.
That's true.
You're dangerous.
Mm-hmm. Dangerous.
And so we worship and celebrate myopia, and we demonize expanded awareness. And that, when you break down the system and you break down the structure, that is systematic. It's exactly what needs to happen. Okay, you have a population of expanded awareness people. And anyone can do it. You know, it's not, you don't have to sit cross-legged on a mountain. It's just opening your mind to greater possibilities. You try to centrally control people in that mode. You try to dictate to them what they will think and won't think and will say and won't say. You've got no chance. Because one of the things that happens when you expand your awareness and you expand your understanding of who we are, consciousness, awareness, not the body's a vehicle for awareness to experience this band of frequencies we call the world. We are consciousness. We are infinite, eternal consciousness expressing itself, experiencing itself. So suddenly, what is there to fear? What does it matter what some people think of you or don't think of you? What's it matter? What's it matter if some people say this or say that about you? Doesn't matter. Why should it matter? And what's happening is we are being turned, well, not we, some of us are not, but vast numbers of people are being turned into victims. Victims of this, victim of that, victim of this, victim of that. I'm a victim. It's become a war medal, being a victim. Political correctness only exists because of victims, which is why political correctness, which is about silencing the population from saying anything worth hearing, to increase the power of political correctness to silence the population. Political correctness must constantly invent more and more reasons to be a victim. Everyone is becoming a victim. I'm offended. I'm offended. I have a cure for that. I have a cure for being offended. Don't be. Choose not to be. I spent nearly 30 years, particularly in Britain, but other parts of the world as well, being ridiculed, being abused, being laughed at. I'm not offended. To be called mad by an idiot is a compliment. Not something to be offended by. And so how come I can face what was in Britain for a long time, historical levels of ridicule and abuse, and I'm not offended? I don't want to silence anybody that ridicules and abuses me. Good luck to you. Couldn't care less, mate. You've a right to your opinion, even though it's based on no research whatsoever. But, you know, if you want to get your opinions from no research, well, please feel free. Just don't tell me what I'm going to say and what I think and what I believe, because I ain't having it. And this is another part, another expression of becoming conscious beyond the program, is say what you like. I'm infinite awareness. I'm all that is, has been, and ever can be. And I'm going to be offended by what this chap on the corner of the street is shouting at me? What? Of course not. But when you get into victim mode, being a victim becomes your self-identity. And therefore, the more you can have a sense of victimhood, the more you are solidifying your self-identity. And we are in a world where more and more people, particularly young people, because they're the most targeted, because they're the adults in the world that we're heading into if we don't wake up. They are increasingly being defined, a bit self-defining, through their level of victimhood. And there's almost a hierarchy, there's a political correct hierarchy. And the higher your place in the hierarchy is depicted by the size of your sense of victimhood, which is why the political correct hierarchy of all these different levels of race and gender, everything, that you go higher in the hierarchy, the smaller the minority. The smaller the minority, the higher you are in the hierarchy. So this will go on, self-dividing as we are seeing more and more, just smaller and smaller minorities of victimhood, until we say, I choose not to be offended. Nice. Hierarchy crashes. Because without victimhood and being offended, there is no hierarchy of political correctness. Thus, there is no hierarchy of self-censorship and the destruction of freedom of speech, which is where we're heading with this nonsense.
Anyway, are you still dangerous for the system, or?
Well, the system better decide that itself. I have enough people trying to silence me to suggest that they don't like what I'm saying, and I take that as an enormous compliment from the direction that it's coming from. The system survives by the suppression of information to stop the exposure of the system and what it's really doing and why and where it's leading. So information itself, beyond the program, beyond the mainstream, becomes the danger to this system, because it exposes what it's really happening. And with the emergence of the so-called independent or alternative media around the world, much of which is just another expression of the system, by the way, but not all of it. And that emergence has given people other sources of information from which to view themselves or which to view the world. And that is dangerous to the system, and it knows it, and that is why we're now having, quite openly, Google own YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and all these new sources of mass communication using algorithms to suppress the circulation of this information, because it has got too dangerous. People have looked at this information and they've gone, actually, this makes more sense of the world than what I've been told up to this point by the mainstream. So now they're trying to shut it off. So there are efforts to silence me from speaking in public in a number of places. I get called silly names by silly people. You've got these internet giants who have taken over control of so much of the flow of information that people receive, now suppressing it. So the system is terrified of information that exposes the system, and that's what I deal with. So I guess I am dangerous, and they haven't seen anything yet.
But if you compare this time and maybe 3-4 years ago, it's different?
Oh yes. I mean, this basically goes on from that last question. The reason now they're running around with their algorithms and their fake news excuses to suppress anything but fake news is because of the change that's taken place. I started out nearly 30 years ago now, talking about this information, and I was talking to nobody. No one wanted to listen. Very few people were actually doing it. It was a very lonely road. There was no alternative media. Basically, there was no internet then, and nothing like what we know it today. It was very, very small and very limited. And when I started out, it was still at the level of handing leaflets out in the street. That was your form of communication. But through the internet, which is a two-edged sword, it's been a very positive thing up to this point. Now they're trying to take the positive out of it and only leave the what they want, which is the ability to suppress information and keep surveillance on people. But up to this point, it's been very, very positive in this way. And I have seen dramatic differences on this world tour, this all-day event world tour, which is just winding down now before I go in another direction. We started out in Britain, then Australia and America and all over Europe, down through the Balkans, back to Britain, Ireland, been everywhere. There is definitely a change taking place, and not just in the numbers of people who are saying, well, hold on a minute, let's have a look at this again. Maybe it's not so crazy, but also in the type of people. People working in the system that you thought, well, they'll never open their minds to anything but the system's version of everything, and they are. And there is an awakening going on. There is, and we need to push on. The very fact that they're now running around trying to suppress the information that's helping people look at the world in a different way shows how successful it's been and how concerned they are about the fact that the population in greater and greater numbers is starting to get it. Starting to see, actually, we have been lied to all our lives. Oh, by the way, not just lied to here, there, and a bit over there, lied to about the very fundamentals of reality, life, and world events. You know, one of the great defenses that this manipulation has is that what's happening in the world is so fantastically different to what we're told is happening, that many people can't make that leap. No, it can't be that different. We'd know about it. Well, no, you wouldn't, because of the way the system works. And the alternative media, especially the best of it, has helped people make that leap by providing the information to show that actually it is happening. And so when I look now at the world and the way the information is received against 1991, 92, 93, it's another world. So there's a lot to be encouraged by. Yeah. But we have to keep going, and we have to push it on. Yeah. And we have to stop walking backwards with a white flag in the air, being intimidated into silence because what will people say about me? They'll say I'm racist, they'll say I'm this, I'm phobic, they'll say I'm that, they'll say I'm this. Say it. I'm not offended. Hey, it's not true, but say what you like. I'm going to say what I believe. And if you don't think that I can say what I believe, don't start hurling the word fascist and Nazi at everyone else. Find yourself a frickin' mirror and have a look at one. Because what did the Nazis do? The Nazis and every other tyranny, left, right, whatever, when they get control, they want control of information. What did the Nazis do? They burned the books of people having a different view. They burned the books of people exposing the Nazis. They destroyed, banned, broke up with violence public meetings of people who were exposing the Nazis. And now we see the anti-Nazi progressive movement acting in exactly the same way while screaming Nazi at everyone else. What an irony, but what a wonderful example of the inverted world that we live in.
Have you seen Matrix, the trilogy Matrix?
Yeah.
In the last part.
Many times.
Me too. In the last part was very interesting scene, and the chief of the Matrix give the power to Neo to win in the Matrix to win. So, and in the last time, I have a feeling that a part of this system of the Matrix helped us to win. A small part of the system is on our side. Do you feel it also?
Well, I would put it like
you
this.
understand me what I mean?
I would put it like this. I mean, I go into this in the books at great length, the new one at length, with a lot of detail. I say we live in a simulation, a construct. And I've been saying this and writing this now since about 2003, when I started to think this is what's going on. The Matrix movie trilogy was a wonderful visual example of expression of what I'm talking about. What I'm seeing now more and more in the last 2 years are people within the system, including NASA scientists and other mainstream scientists, who are also saying, actually, it does look like we live in some kind of simulation. You know, the mathematics of this reality are the same mathematics that you find in computer games. So the simulation itself is, it's an interactive simulation. So you can change the simulation by the way you interact with it. Or you can let the simulation dictate your reality. We're talking the program again. So that is, that pressure is imposing itself to close the mind down, to push us into only 5 sense perception. But if beyond this simulation is infinite awareness, all it is, has been, and ever can be, all knowledge, all knowing, all inspiration, all creativity, all potential, all of it. And those people, and anyone can do it, who is willing to open their energetic field, their mind, their consciousness, to levels of reality beyond the simulation, then they see the world in a completely different way, because the simulation is no longer telling them what to think. They're looking into the simulation symbolically and literally, rather than being the simulation. And again, there are people that do that. There have been people throughout what we call history who have done that. There are more and more people doing that. And then now they're seeing the world in a completely different way. And what is the response? Just as the Google, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, all expressions of the same web and the same network are trying to shut down information that will get people to look at the world in another way. This whole transhumanist agenda of connecting people to, and people's brains to technology and artificial intelligence, that is seeking to lock everybody technologically into this simulation so that they cannot expand their awareness beyond it. And then the simulation, and that which controls the simulation, which is a non-human force, which I write about in the books, then has total control of the human mind. And the devil's playground, as I call it, Silicon Valley, which is one of the most evil sections of real estate on planet Earth, which is driving this transhumanist agenda. Some of their spokespeople for Frankenstein are openly talking about connecting the human brain to artificial intelligence by 2030. As we speak, we're in 2017. And for AI to more and more after that do human thinking at the deletion of what we now call human thought. And people like Ray Kurzweil, who is a spokesperson for Frankenstein and a Google executive. I'm staggered, a Google executive. And he's talking about this, I'm shocked. Google's a monster, by the way. So is Facebook. And he is selling this now, this connection to AI, as it will make us superhuman. It won't. The intention is to make us subhuman, no longer human. And we need to wake up to it, and wake up to it fast. And this is another reason they were trying to more and more suppress information flows outside of the norm, outside of the mainstream, so that as few people as possible get access to this this awareness of where this is going, and going fast.